Thad took me to lunch in one of the first-class restaurants. We sat in a lovely wicker chair at a beautifully laid table with sparkling china. We had looked like two happy fools because we just sat there grinning at each other, too blissfully in love to even need to speak much. I was engaged to Thad. I'd said the word yes, and it felt like the smartest thing I'd ever said. Let's not tell anyone we're engaged until after Mimi's wedding, I suggested. I don't want to take away from her excitement. She should be in the center of attention. All right, he agreed. He smiled into my eyes, and I smiled back. Everything was so perfect. The rest of the day was spent in the third class with many seamstress Lady Duff Gordon, who had hired to make the dresses she designed. What a different world it was down there. Compared to the splendor of the first class, and even second class, I'd hardly given it a look when we first came on board. But now I paid more attention, peering into many open doors in various cabins. The cabins were tiny. Some had 2 bunks or beds, so the family of 4 could squeeze into one small space. There were almost no windows at all. People lived from their suitcases, since there was only one narrow dresser in each room, and after 4 days at sea, many of the rooms had grown quite disheveled. People called to one another from across the hall and moved freely in and out of one another's rooms. It reminded me a bit of the floating village. A workstation for the dresses had been set up in the rear section of the third-class eating kitchen, which consisted of rows of wooden tables and benches. There were no shortage of sewing machines, since the great many of the third-class women on the shipping and the machines in New York. They were intended to make their living from them. Those not working on the machines were occupied by hand work such as cutting and pinning and hand stitching buttons and collars to the hems. My sisters were all there for their dress fittings. I ached to tell them about Thad and me, but I held firm in my decision to keep it a secret until after Mimi's wedding. It was only fair that she should be the one everyone is thinking about and talking about. It was her wedding after all. It seems more fun down here in third class, Emma said, standing on the table with her bare feet as a seamstress and plump Italian woman, with her hair caught in a red bandana, pinned the hem of her bridesmaid dress. She had resigned herself to the fact that her fine brown hair would not take a curl, so it had been braided into prettily thick plaint and started high on her head and ran down the back of her neck. Amelie nodded in agreement from the chair where she sat, arms outstretched across the table as the seamstress sewed one of the many covered buttons that ran down the side of her dress' narrow sleeves. She swept her hair into equally fine as Emma's, into a graceful coil of nape around her neck. "How can you say that this is better?" Blythe cried. She looked so comically, with her hair set in a blizzard of white rags, just waiting to produce gorgeous curls, and would be swept atop her head for the wedding. "I'm so glad we're not crammed down here. It's too warm. There's no air." Mimi stepped from behind the makeshift dressing room that had been constructed with sheets tossed over a slack of chairs. She was wearing a white wedding gown Lady Duff Gordon had designed just for her. We all stared at her, mouths agape, in stunned admiration. In fact, the entire room, which had only moments before been abuzz with animated female chatter, was now silent. The dress was utterly modern and completely breathtaking. It had none of the ballooning, flourished skirts of traditional dresses, but all fluidity and smooth lines. It was made from the snowy white satin and the shimmering from its straight-cut neckline all the way down to the form-slimming body to the end of the long skirt which swirled around Mimi like a glowing cloud on the floor. The long sleeves startled just below Mimi's shoulders and were made from the most exquisite white lace. The lush, creamy white sheen of the dress was dramatic contrast to the luxurious black pile of shining hair atop her head. Natalie's private hairdresser had whipped it into a breathtaking elaborate style, completely with glistening crystals ornamented in hairpins. Mimi was nothing short of magnificent. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. "You could be on the cover of a fashion magazine," Blythe murmured reverently. "You like it?" Mimi asked, and was answered by a wave of applause. She beamed with pleasure. I hoped I would always see her looking so happy. A wonderful moment was abruptly interrupted by a man careening into the room. There was a thug with the derpy hat, though now he clutched in his hand as he ran to the far end of the kitchen. Thad raced into the room after him. The man scrambled onto the table, attempting to climb through the open high window leading to the poop deck, and raced around the room and lunged at his legs, pulling him to the ground. With a forceful swing, the man punched Thad in the face, knocking him down, and then raced out of the kitchen. The woman near Thad surrounded him. One blotted his face carefully with a wet cloth and wiped away the blood. Another came with a towel filled with ice from the kitchen. I hurried to his side. Thad, are you okay? He dabbed his sore nose tenderly and winced. I can't tell if it's broken. No broken, just hurt very much, a woman who had wiped his face assured, with an accented English. What happened? I'd asked. I found him in our room and I chased him all over the ship, till we ran down here. The room wasn't even tossed around, so I think I have interrupted him before he had a chance to steal anything. Tesla usually naps at that time. He would have been there if he hadn't had a sudden urge to go back to the telegraph room for 1,000th time. Do you believe the man would have hurt him? I think that's what he was there for, yeah, Thad said. Let's us hope the villain drives off the ship and never returns, one of the women said. Her comment was met with many returns, with a wave of agreement. I agreed with the sentiment, but thought it was unlikely. More probable was that he would continue to lurk around on the ship until we docked. That Tesla and his inventions would be in danger until then. I was suddenly glad Tesla would be seeing Colonel Astor that night. The sooner someone else knew about his invention and its possible application, the lesser chance it was on someone else for stealing it. I didn't want to see him lose out again, as he had lost credit to the radio to Macaroni. Thad got to his feet, still holding the ice to his face. Let me change out of this dress, and I'll walk you back to the infirmary, I offered. Then we should tell the ship's security that your room had been broken into again. I noticed purple bruises starting to form under both eyes. You need a doctor, I said anxiously. I think your nose is broken. No, it's not, he disagreed. I wasn't convinced and touched it gingerly. With a howl of pain, he jumped away from me. Why'd you do that? He cried. The line of blood ran from his right nostril. It is broken, I insisted. Come with me, we're going to the ship's infirmary. When we got there, the ship's doctor confirmed the theory. Oh, it's broken all right. The purple-blue color of the rings under Thad's eyes had deepened in just the time it had taken to get there. I left Thad in the infirmary and walked out to the deck alone, leaning on the railing and glanced out once more to the rolling waves and the quite steady hum of the ship's motors, mixed with the crushing of the white water below, and found it very calming. A strange thought came to me. Wonder if being on the ocean, traveling from one country to another, was what it meant to be like the spirits of the beyond. If indeed there was such a thing. One wasn't in England anymore, but hadn't landed in America yet either. One was just floating. It was still possible to travel back to the fourth. Maybe some spirits didn't want to commit to either side and chose instead to float between the very long time. I could understand that happening, but I hate to leave all the people I loved. Perhaps I would choose to go be a ghost given the chance.